For your dolly sleep has flown. Don't dare let her tremble for the witcher.
Mary was an old woman that lived deep in the forest in a tiny cottage where she sold herbal remedies for a living. Folks in the town nearby claimed she was a witch and never dared cross her for fear of being cursed with famine, sickness, or any number of terrible things that could fall upon them or their families. So they pretty much left her alone, and she them, unless they visited her cottage seeking her remedies. But over time, girls began to disappear from the town, one by one each month. The families of the girls searched high and low for them, but they were nowhere in sight. A few brave souls even went to Mary's house in the woods to see if she knew anything, but she denied any knowledge of their disappearance. But it was also noted that Mary's appearance had changed after the fourth girl had gone missing. She looked much younger, more attractive. Neighbors were suspicious, but yet they had no proof that she was responsible. That was until one night when the teenage daughter of a miller rose from her bed and began walking outside. The miller's wife had a toothache that night and was up treating it in the kitchen when she saw her daughter leaving the house. She called out to her daughter, asking where she was going, but her daughter never answered. So she then went upstairs and woke her husband, telling him what happened. As he got dressed, the miller and his wife rushed outside, where they saw their daughter slowly walking towards the woods. As they tried to stop her, she kept breaking away from them, never breaking her concentration on where she was heading. Their cries awakened their neighbors, and they came out to assist the couple. But as they did, a little girl told them she could hear music. The adults, however, didn't hear a thing, so they asked her where it was coming from. So as the little girl listened, she pointed towards the woods, the same direction the miller's daughter was heading. So the townspeople came up with a plan. As they armed themselves with guns, pitchforks, torches, your usual lynch mob gear back in the day, they followed the possessed miller's daughter and the little girl who heard the music. As they ventured into the woods, suddenly the little girl shouted, "Over there!" As they turned, there stood Mary beside a tree, playing a flute. Once she saw she was noticed, she stopped playing and started to flee. But as she did, one of the townsmen pointed his rifle at Mary and fired off a shot. The bullet struck Mary in her left hip, and she fell screaming. The angry townspeople then dragged Mary back into town, where they tied her up in an open field. They then placed wood all around her and doused it and Mary with lantern oil. But before they could set her ablaze, Mary cursed the villagers, saying, anyone who called her name while looking in a mirror, she would send her spirit to steal that person's soul, and they shall burn with her for all eternity alongside her. The townspeople then lit the fire, listened to Mary's painful screams, and watched as she was reduced to nothing but charred ashes. After she was burned to death, the townspeople then went to her house in the woods, where they came upon the 4 unmarked graves of the missing girls. They then went inside, where they found a bathtub full of blood. Turns out, Mary murdered 1 girl a month and bathed in her blood as a way to make herself young again. earning her the name Bloody Mary. Years have gone by since that day, and by that time, Bloody Mary was now a story told to scare children into behaving properly. Teenagers, not so afraid. One took it as a joke, and one night, while sitting in the dark, holding a candle, called out Bloody Mary's name. Meanwhile, her parents were in a nearby room asleep, when all of a sudden, they heard her scream. As they got up and burst through their daughter's room, they looked in the mirror and saw her banging against the other side, screaming for help. And behind her was Bloody Mary, laughing as she claimed her latest victim. And to this day, they say anyone who's foolish enough to chant her name while staring in a mirror in the dark will meet the same fate of having their souls taken by Mary, where they will be trapped in the mirror to burn with her forever. So, do you dare?
My dear daughter,